Do you want to know which wide receivers you should be starting or sitting in Week 11 for fantasy football? Well, we're about to tell you. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris, and we're going to do as we do each and every week and go over all the wide receivers that matter for fantasy, this time for Week 11. Before we get to those matchups, don't forget 4 teams on bye this week. That would be the Dolphins, the Jaguars, the Buccaneers, and the Seahawks. And we still have a few receivers. You don't really have to sweat. You can keep these guys in your lineup if you have them. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, AJ Brown, and T. Higgins. All right, those guys you don't have to worry about, but let's talk about the guys you're just not sure about, starting with the Thursday night matchup, the Titans at the Packers. You know what? In Tennessee now, it looks like we might have only one guy to talk about, and it's not Robert Woods because he's done really nothing for a long time. But Treylon Burks is back. Do you think Burks gets more involved and maybe becomes the number one guy in this offense?
Maybe, eventually, but not this week. He's not going to be in any of my lineups. I'm sitting Treylon Burks.
Yeah, don't look at what CeeDee Lamb did against this Packers defense and say, hey, he could do that. Like, not even close. So, look, Burks, I talked about as a guy to stash in the early waiver wire video from before, but that's it. Like, it's going to take a while. Stash, but don't start. And then, of course, there's the rookie that we're going to talk about for a while after last week's performance. Christian Watson, obviously a high priority add. If you do land him, and maybe you did put a claim on him, I don't know, Chris, did you? Are you going to put him in your lineup?
If you need him, you can start him. It's a good matchup against the Titans. I do think the Packers will have to throw quite a bit. We know he can hit on that home run. If you need him, you can start him.
I mean, on paper, it's a great matchup. If you look at what Watson did last week, you think, man, I don't want that on my bench. But then, of course, there's no guarantee he does again. He's going to be what he is all season, maybe all career long for him, a boom bust play that you could flex. So it's not a bad week to take a chance on him because Dobbs is still out, Cobb is still out, but just don't get your hopes up too much. And what about Allen Lazard? He kind of took a backseat last week because of Watson. How do you feel about him?
I feel better about him than Watson this week. I know he had a down game last week, but that was a tough matchup against the Cowboys. This is not a tough matchup at all. He's still Aaron Rodgers' number one target. We know he gets looks in the red zone. If I have Lazard, I'm starting him.
Yeah, I think you got to feel pretty good about him. I will agree. You got to feel better about Lazard than Watson because, again, the defense probably focused a lot more attention on Lazard than Watson last week. Not going to be the case this week. So I think Lazard is a solid wide receiver 3. Bears at the Falcons. Don't expect a lot of, aerial fireworks this game. But look, Darnell Mooney, great spot for him. Does he smash against the Falcons secondary?
I don't think Darnell Mooney will ever smash this year, but I think because of the matchup, he's at least startable this week in a good spot.
Yeah, look, we've been saying to stream against this Falcons defense for wide receiver. This might be an exception, but yeah, I think he is at least startable because of this matchup. And then Drake London, well, he scored last week, but still no yardage. Is this week any different?
Probably not. I still can't trust him. The Bears, much worse against the run than the pass. It still has Marcus Mariota. I'm not starting Drake London.
Can't do it. I mean, the random chance he scores again, I'll take that chance somewhere else. I'm sitting Drake London. Panthers taking on the Ravens. Well, PJ Walker with a high ankle sprain. It looks like we get to see Baker Mayfield behind center again. What does that mean for DJ Moore?
It means bad news for DJ Moore. We've already seen this. Cannot start DJ Moore with Baker Mayfield. Cannot do it.
It was going to be such a good spot for him to, I played Maryland for college ball, going back against this Ravens defense. It gives up a lot of points to wide receivers, and now I just suddenly have no interest in DJ Moore. I mean, you could stream him, flex him if you really need to, but I'm sorry. Baker Mayfield, to me, just kills his value. Terrace Marshall, I imagine we're not too much higher.
No. Yeah, no. Value's gone for Terrace Marshall. Not starting him.
No, definitely not starting Marshall this week. And on the other side, I guess it's just Devin Duvernay for now. I mean, Devin Duvernay can do something against the Panthers, maybe?
Maybe. Probably not. I'm not starting him.
No, and neither am I. Cleveland is going to Buffalo. Amari Cooper, big dud last week. Does he repeat this week?
In Buffalo, on the road, Amari Cooper, probably not. I'm sitting him.
We got an interesting tidbit of information from one of our viewers. Amari Cooper is really bad in away games and really good at home. This isn't just a road game, it's against Buffalo. And so, man, I'm just sitting Amari Cooper this week. All right, and then what about Donovan Peoples-Jones? He actually wasn't too bad last week. Do you think that he can be the number one receiver on this team?
I mean, maybe, but look at the Vikings last week. Yes, Justin Jefferson went off, but he's Justin Jefferson. He's making impossible catches. Nobody else did anything for the Vikings receivers, and they threw the ball a ton. I don't expect anybody on the Browns to do anything against his defense in the passing game. Not Donovan Peoples-Jones either. I'm sitting him.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it was a much better matchup last week against the Miami secondary. No to Peoples-Jones, not even as a streaming option. And then Gabe Davis finally came through. Maybe he does it 2 weeks in a row. What do you think?
I think this is a good enough spot that you should give him a chance again. It's not a great spot like it was last week, but it's good enough. We know what he can do. Josh Allen's arm looked fine. I think you start Gabe Davis.
My worry is that, they really don't have to pass the ball as much because obviously Cleveland's not going to put up as many points, we don't think. But still, I mean, you just hate to have Gabe Davis on your bench because you see what he can do. So I think he is still in the wide receiver 3 conversation. Commanders will be traveling to Houston this next week. And so let's start with Scary Terry. Do you think that he can do anything against Houston?
I mean, on paper you think, it's Houston. It's an easy matchup, but it's really not. They really don't, they're not that bad against wide receivers. They do a pretty good job against the pass. Now, I know Washington is not a team that can just pound the ball like a lot of other teams, but I think Terry in this matchup is only startable if you need him.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head there with the fact that most teams can just run over Houston, right? They don't need to pass the ball, but maybe Washington's not really that team. So for that reason, I'm going to be irrationally high on Terry McLaurin and say I'm definitely starting him this week. I think that he could boom. What about Curtis Samuel? Same thing for him?
Yeah, same thing. If you need him, you can start him. Yeah, that's it. That's all I ever really feel about Curtis Samuel.
That's always kind of what he is, right? You never know what you're going to get. He's not a super high ceiling, not a super low floor. You can flex him if you need to. And then Jahan Dotson, now finally healthy, hopefully. Anything that he can do?
No, I'm not starting him. You want to stash him, hold him, see what happens, but I'm not starting him.
Yeah, Dotson was pretty much touchdown dependent early in the season, and all that came with Carson Wentz at quarterback. He's been gone too long. Heineke's just going to look for Terry. I'm going to say you can sit Dotson. And then on the other side, Brandon Cooks maybe making a reappearance, found the end zone. Do you think that he kind of comes back and becomes relevant in fantasy?
No, I mean, it's not a bad matchup, but he feels like he has to score a touchdown to give you anything at all. I'm not banking on that. I'm sitting Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I'll say at least, as far as these flex options that you might need, especially with teams on bye, he's not the worst option, but he's also not the best. So start if you really need to. Nico Collins put up some points as well, but do you feel any better about him?
I do. I actually like Nico Collins more than Brandon Cooks. He's more involved. He gets balls down the field more. Very risky, but in this matchup, I think if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, look, I was really high on Nico Collins before the season started, but I really expected better things from this Houston offense than we've seen. Not really a big step forward. I mean, Collins is a talented guy. I think this matchup's okay. You could flex him if you need to. Eagles going to take on the Colts, and we're going to ask again, what do we expect from Devontae Smith? Because it's like we never really know.
Yeah, he's another one of these guys you just never really know. It's hard to bench him. This isn't the worst matchup. Not a great matchup, but not a bad matchup. I think in this matchup, if you need him, you can start him.
I mean, he's that classic boom bust guy. You hate to bench, but you don't really feel great about starting, based on the fact that they're taking on the Colts. I don't expect big numbers from him, but he's still at least in the wide receiver 3 conversation. And then on the other side, Michael Pittman. Well, at least he's now part of a conversation because Matt Ryan is back. I know we're not going to go crazy here, but how high are you on Pittman this week?
This week, not very high. It's the Eagles, Darius Slay, James Bradbury. If you need him, you can start him, but not a guy you have to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good spot for him, and Jim Irsay needs to stop getting carried away himself, the way he's saying. But look, he's startable. just don't expect a lot in week 11. What about Paris Campbell? I mean, I did advocate for him as a waiver wire pickup. He actually outproduced Michael Pittman this past week, and he's actually done pretty well the last 3 games that Matt Ryan has been the starter.
Yeah, again, but the matchup is tough, so I'm not going to say you need to put him in your lineup, but if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, you could definitely do worse than Paris Campbell. To me, kind of that wide receiver 4 range, if you're talking about a 12-team league, that means he's a flex option. The Jets are going to take on the Patriots, and Garrett Wilson is clearly the lead guy there in New York. What do you think he can do against this Patriots defense?
I mean, it's a tough matchup, but it doesn't seem to matter for Garrett Wilson. He's getting so many targets. Elijah Moore barely involved. Corey Davis still banged up. I think if you have Garrett Wilson, you got to start him.
Yeah, I mean, really tough Patriots. If there's one thing they do have, it's a good pass defense. I don't think we can expect a lot, but again, I'll go with him over a lot of these other streaming options that we've talked about. So I very kind of hesitantly will say you can start Garrett Wilson. And then the only reason we're going to talk about Elijah Moore is because, well, supposedly they're going to change his spot. He's going to move him back to a slot role. Maybe he gets involved. Do you think that after the bye, they're going to actually get him involved?
I don't know. Let me see it first. I'm not starting Elijah Moore this week. No, let me see it.
Yeah, it would have to be a total smash spot. And it's the opposite. It's a really bad matchup, so you can't start Elijah Moore. But I'll be interested to see if they actually throw it to him. And then the other side, Jacoby Myers. What do you think he can do?
Again, Jacoby Myers, one of these guys, I feel like you kind of have to start him if you have him. His target share is there. The Jets do have a good secondary. Not a guy like you have to force in your lineup, but if you need him, you can start him.
I usually would say you can feel pretty good about Jacoby Myers, but I am very nervous with, Sauce Gardner on the other side. The Jets have a really good pass defense. Man, I would say this week, Myers to me is only a desperation flex. Then we got 2 of the more underwhelming pass attacks in the league here. And let's start with the Rams. That's right. It looks like Cooper Kupp is out of action. So are we going to see Allen Robinson actually finally get a lot of targets?
Maybe. I don't know. It's a pretty good matchup against the Saints. I can't consider Allen Robinson like a must start, even without Cooper Kupp. If you need him, you can start him.
Well, I'm going to agree with you there. They're not going to get fooled by this, thinking Robinson will get involved. You could flex him out, but man, only if you really don't have anybody better. And then the other side, Chris Olave, look, he kind of has let us down the last couple of weeks. Does anything change now against this Rams defense?
Probably not, unless they go to Jameis Winston. I don't. If it's Andy Dalton, I mean, you can start him, but I can't consider him a must start anymore. Not with what we've seen the last few weeks in a tough matchup. If you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, not a great matchup. I can't go must sit with him, but yeah, to me, only a flex option. He definitely drops down the rankings this week. And part of that is because now Jarvis Landry is back, and he was almost as involved in terms of routes and targets as Olave this week. What do you think about Landry, though?
Never excites me. He's like the low ADOT guy. Not going to rack up a ton of yards. Probably not going to score a touchdown. I'm not starting Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, I think he's fine to stash for later in the year if hopefully they go back to Winston, but you can't start him this week. The Lions taking on the Giants, and the Sun God has returned and blessed us with fantasy points in abundance. He did it last week. Will he do it this week against the Giants?
I mean, maybe. Again, tough matchup. The Giants are just going to slow the game down. Good secondary. But you can't ever bench Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's one of these guys, you start him every week and you take whatever you get.
That's exactly right. You can't bench him. But again, I'm pretty sure he's not going to put up the same amount of points he did last week. But you still have to start him. At least he's going to get you something. Will Wan'Dale Robinson get you anything? Because he really hasn't done much the last couple of weeks. Been pretty quiet.
Yeah, I know it's the Lions, but still, I can't trust Wan'Dale, especially with Darius Slayton out there. Whatever Kenny Golladay does or doesn't do, he's at least a warm body out there. I'm sitting Wan'Dale.
I think you could flex him because of the matchup, but again, you're getting pretty deep here. There was already several other guys we talked about I feel better, so really just a deep league desperation flex. Now, I do like Darius Slayton a bit more because he's been productive. He's scored 2 out of the last 3 games. He's been targeted at least about 5 times a game. Do you feel a big game coming from him against the Lions?
I mean, he's one of these guys. It can always happen, but I worry again. I know he did score last week, but it was a short pass. He broke a tackle and took it to the house. I feel like this is going to be another game where Saquon runs it 30-plus times because the Lions can't stop the run. So if you need him, you can start him.
I mean, the Lions can't stop much of anything, which is why I feel kind of good about Darius Slayton this week because he's the lead receiver now in New York. I can't say he's a must start, but I think he's a pretty solid start. I would say I feel pretty good. He's going to be at least a top 40 receiver, which means most leagues he's got starter value. Raiders going to take on the Broncos. Pretty much as brutal a matchup as you can get for wide receivers. I mean, you still have to roll Devontae Adams out, of course. I don't think you have to roll out Mac Hollins.
No chance I'm starting Mac Hollins against the Broncos.
Yeah, I didn't think so, and neither am I. Now, on the other side, Courtland Sutton didn't quite smash as we thought he might. He should have. Anything better this week against the Raiders?
I mean, it's another great matchup. It should be a great game for Courtland Sutton, but this Broncos offense is completely broken. I can only put Courtland Sutton in the start him if you need him range.
I know. I mean, really should have had a good week. Should have another big week, especially if Judy is out, but how excited can you get? So start him if you don't have 2 or 3 better receivers. And then Jerry Jeudy, not sure yet if he's going to play. Looks like he avoided a serious injury, but doesn't mean he'll be active in Week 11. If he does play, how would you feel?
Not good. I mean, this offense is terrible. He's probably going to be less than 100%. It's a great matchup, but still, it doesn't even matter. I can't trust Jerry Jeudy with a less than 100% ankle in this situation. I'm sitting him.
Yeah, I think you have to sit. Exactly. Cowboys at the Vikings. Michael Gallup, I guess he's still there. I don't know. I haven't heard much from him. I mean, does he do anything to make noise in Week 11?
I mean, he can always score a touchdown or hit a long pass, but that's really all you're hoping for with Michael Gallup. It's a good matchup, but still, just not enough usage for me. I'm sitting Michael Gallup.
I can't start him. I mean, this is a guy, I don't think the matchup really matters. I don't think the targets are a big difference. Another guy coming back from ACL. He's not 100%. His game, a lot of it is that deep ball. It's not happening. I'm sitting him. And then on the other hand, Adam Thielen, I think he's just old now. I mean, I don't know. He's not doing a lot either, even in this Vikings team, which looks like one of the best in the NFL. Can we start Thielen?
No, this is another tough spot for him. Cannot start Adam Thielen.
No, can't do it. Bengals going to take on the Steelers. Jamar Chase still out of action. T. Higgins still a must start. Where does Tyler Boyd fall for you?
I think this week you got to consider him a good start. He's basically the number 2-ish target on this team. And it's a good matchup. So I think if you've got Tyler Boyd, you roll with him.
I feel really good about Tyler Boyd in this matchup. Look, I know they got TJ Watt back and the Steelers defense looks pretty good, but that was against the Saints. I think the Bengals can do some damage. I think Boyd is a solid pick here. I think he's a really good start this week if you have him. And then on the Steelers side, well, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. Let's start with DJ. How do you feel about Deontay?
I mean, not good. You can't ever really feel good about him. This isn't a great matchup. I can't start Deontay Johnson.
I haven't really been high on him all year. There's nothing that Kenny Pickett has done to make me feel any better about this. So I'm not starting Deontay Johnson unless I'm really in need. George Pickens, well, he scored, but it wasn't even on a pass. It was like a rushing touchdown inside the 5-yard line. So that aside, do you have any hope for Pickens?
Not this week. I mean, only 4 targets, only 3 catches. Like you said, like a rushing touchdown. Are we just going to expect a rushing touchdown every week? Is he the new Debo? Probably not. I'm not starting Pickens either.
No. I mean, you'd think he should be doing better because of the talent there, but the quarterback matters, and it's just not happening. All right, buckle up and get ready. Chiefs at Chargers. And not just because we think this could be a high-scoring game, but we have a lot of receivers to talk about here. Let's start with a guy, we don't know his status, but Juju Smith-Schuster had been coming on, and of course you saw that brutal hit in the concussion protocol. Look, there's a good chance he doesn't play. If he does clear protocol and makes it in time, do you put him in your lineup?
I think you have to. This is a good matchup. Like you said, it should be a high-scoring game. If he clears concussion protocol, you got to start him. It's not like he's dealing with an ankle or something like that. So if he plays, you start him.
Yeah, again, he was on track to put up a string of really good games and then got knocked out. So if he plays, yeah, I think you have to roll with him. And then what about Kadarius Toney? Obviously a hot pickup, a guy who's now getting more involved. Let's assume even if Juju does play, can you go with Toney?
I think if Juju plays, he's more of like a desperation flex. You know he can make a play in this matchup, but nothing more than a desperation flex.
All right. I'll say he's flex worthy with or without Juju. Obviously, if Juju doesn't play, that makes him just a stronger flex consideration. And then MVS, I think he did score a touchdown last week, if I'm correct. Does that change your opinion of him?
Not really. I'm just never going to start him. Like, yeah, you if you didn't start him last week, too bad you missed the touchdown. You're not going to get it this week. I'm not starting him.
So fluky, so unpredictable, so not worth it. Keep MVS on your bench or your waiver wire. McCole Hardman didn't play last week. Not sure his status with that abdomen injury. If he plays, do you go back to him? Because he was also putting together a string of games finding the end zone.
Yeah, I think you can at least flex him if you need him, especially if Juju is out. But he was scoring touchdowns. He's involved, so if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, he, again, will always just be one of those guys. Flex if you need, pick up off waivers and stream. That's as high as you can go. All right, now for the Chargers. It's possible that Mike Williams is back. Not quite sure if he'll make it, but on the chance that Williams is active in Week 11, I feel like you kind of have to roll with him.
Yeah, in this matchup against the Chiefs, the Chargers badly need him. You've got to start him.
If he doesn't play, then we're still looking at Josh Palmer as kind of the de facto number one receiver. How do you feel about Palmer against the Chiefs?
Again, good matchup. Not a great secondary. He'll have chances. Not a must start, but a good start.
Solid streamer, I'll say. Feel a little bit better about him than last week, but not as good as the week before. So a decent streamer, maybe wide receiver 4 type. DeAndre Carter actually was the leading receiver for them on Sunday night. Does he have flex appeal?
Yeah, if Mike Williams is out, you can start him if you need him. I'm not expecting a repeat of what we saw the other day, but if you need him, you can start him.
Also worth noting, by the way, Gerald Everett did leave that game early with a groin injury. If he doesn't play and neither Keenan Allen or Mike Williams are playing, then yeah, I think both Palmer and Carter have to be of interest for those who need a receiver. And then Monday night, we have the 49ers at the Cardinals. Deebo Samuel, another disappointing game. Is this going to be a trend? Do you see him turning it around?
I don't know. I mean, his target share isn't very high, and the targets he gets are very low 8-hot targets. I know he's a guy that can, pick up yards after the catch, but man, just not liking what I'm seeing. I'm going to put Deebo only as a start him if you need him.
Man, and that's hard to imagine after last year, but I agree. I don't think you have to start him if you have, better options here. I think that he's the guy who's taken a hit here with CMC, not Brandon Ayuk. So speaking of Brandon Ayuk, he's still looking really good. He's still getting end zone targets. He's getting the work down the field. Is Brandon Ayuk somebody who's now higher on the list than Deebo?
I think he is, but this matchup, the Cardinals do perform pretty well against number one wide receivers. I like Ayuk more than Deebo, but I can't consider him a must start. Again, another guy, if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, just because the way they spread the ball and distribute targets there in San Francisco, I don't think you can ever say, no doubt, have to start Ayuk. But he's a pretty solid start. He always has that upside, that big play in him. So I feel pretty good about Ayuk. And DeAndre Hopkins, kind of the same. I mean, even with a backup quarterback, he's going to get targeted a ton. Zach Ertz is out. Hopkins, pretty much a must start, don't you think?
Yeah, you've got to start DeAndre Hopkins, definitely.
And then Rondell Moore, probably the biggest beneficiary of that Ertz injury. A lot of action there, 9 catches, 94 yards. Is he a must start?
I'm not going to go as far as to say a must start, but with Ertz out against the San Francisco defense, it's much better against the run than the pass. I'm going to say he's a good start.
Agree. Definitely a tough matchup here, but at least he gives you that floor in PPR leagues. So I think I'll go low end wide receiver 3. I think he's a solid start. All right, that's our take on all the wide receivers that you need to know about for fantasy football heading into Week 11. And speaking of Week 11, we have you covered right here with our playlist that has start sit advice for every position, waiver wire, trade advice, you name it, we got you covered.